It started subtly, the kind of thing you barely notice at first. A faint scratching sound, soft and rhythmic, coming from beneath my bed. I heard it for the first time on a quiet Tuesday night, just as I was drifting into sleep. It was light, like fingernails brushing against old wood. I turned on the lamp, glanced underneath the bed, and saw nothing. Maybe it was the house settling or a mouse in the walls. I shrugged it off and went back to sleep. But the next night, it happened again, and the next dot each time I checked the clock. And it was always the same, 2:07 a.m., not 2:05, not to 10. Always exactly 2:07. That precise timing made it feel less like a coincidence and more like a pattern. I started keeping my phone next to me with the flashlight ready. I even sprinkled flour under the bed one night, hoping to catch some kind of trail. In the morning, the flour was perfectly smooth. No prints, no tracks. But the sound had still come. The thought of rats made me uncomfortable, so I called pest control. They found no evidence of rodents, no holes, no droppings, nothing. My bed was cleared, the walls were clean, the floor was solid. But that didn't stop the sound. It kept happening, always at 2:07, always soft, always deliberate. Some nights it would only last a minute. Other times it would go on until I forced myself to get up and turn on all the lights. Then came the blinking dot. It was a Friday night when I first saw it. I had been lying in bed with my eyes wide open, too afraid to fall asleep, when I heard the familiar scratch begin. My body stiffened. I reached slowly for the phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam shook slightly in my hands as I knelt down and lifted the bed skirt. I held my breath and looked underneath, and something blinked just for a moment. A quick, wet blink to pale eyelids opening and closing in the beam of my light. I screamed and jumped back, scrambling to my feet. When I looked again, there was nothing there, just the shadowy underside of my bed and the faint trail of dust. My heart wouldn't slow down. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been a trick of the light or some kind of waking dream. But deep down, I knew what I saw. Eyes that blinked back at me like they had been waiting to be seen. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I left the house that day and stayed out late, too afraid to come back while it was dark. When I did return, I pushed the bed away from the wall, checked every inch of the floor, sealed the windows, and left all the lights on. But none of that mattered. At 2:07 a.m., the scratching began again. This time, it was louder, not violent, not clawing, but more purposeful, like something was dragging long nails in slow arcs against the wooden floor. I sat up in bed, frozen, staring at the dark space. Between the floor and the mattress, the room felt colder than before, like the air had thickened. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, waiting for movement, another blink, something. But there was nothing, just the sound. Then it stopped. I waited for a minute, then another, when I finally leaned over the edge of the bed again, flashlight in hand. There was no sign of anything, but my body still felt watched, like whatever was under there hadn't gone. It had just become still, aware that I was listening. The next morning, I found long, faint scratches on the floorboards beneath the bed. They hadn't been there before. They were wide at one end, narrowing like claws. I touched them. The wood felt warm. I couldn't explain that part. From then on, I slept with the lights on, my feet pulled up, refusing to let them dangle over the edge. I considered moving the bed entirely, but a voice in the back of my mind whispered that it wouldn't help. Whatever was under there wasn't staying because of the bed. It had chosen me, and it liked being found. At first, I thought maybe it was just a coincidence. A creaky house, some old wiring, or shifting floorboards, anything but what it really felt like. The idea of something under my bed was too absurd to accept. But every night at 2:07 a.m., the scratching sound returned. It wasn't wild or erratic. It was slow, controlled, and deliberate. It didn't come from the walls or the ceiling. It always came from directly beneath me. I started leaving my light on, thinking maybe it would stop whatever was happening. It didn't. The sound would start anyway, right on time, like clockwork. But I noticed something strange. After a few nights, the sound was getting louder. Not dramatically, but just enough to feel closer. Like it had moved a few inches closer to the edge of the bed. I checked under there every morning, shining a flashlight and even using my phone's camera. But I never saw anything. Then I noticed the marks. One morning, after another sleepless night, I noticed something on the floor near the head of my bed. I got on my hands and knees to look, and that's when I saw them long, thin scratch marks in the wood. They weren't random. They were drawn toward the bed, not just near it toward it, for marks, evenly spaced, each about a foot long, dragged across the boards like something had reached out from underneath and scraped its claws on the way in. They looked too deliberate to be from a pet or old furniture. I tried to ignore it. I really did. I told myself it could have been caused by the metal bed frame shifting. Or maybe I did it while moving something without realizing. I cleaned the floor, rearranged things, and even placed a rug under the bed. But the next night, when I finally got up the courage to look again, the rug had been pushed aside. New marks had appeared, closer than before. That's when I started noticing the bruises. They were small at first, tiny purple spots on my ankles or the back of my calves. I brushed them off as bumping into things. I wasn't the most graceful person, and I figured maybe I'd hit something in my sleep. But they grew darker, larger. Some mornings I'd find symmetrical marks on both legs, almost like fingers had pressed into my skin. I felt cold dread build in me. I couldn't explain the bruises. There was no pain during the night, no waking up in the middle of something touching me, and yet my body was starting to show signs. I began placing pillows under the bed to block the space, but every morning they were moved, sometimes shoved halfway out into the room, like they'd been ejected. I started setting my phone to record audio while I slept, and when I played it back, I heard soft, dragging sounds like nails across wood. One recording had a faint whisper I couldn't make out. It was just low enough to be inhuman, but unmistakably real. I showed the scratches to a friend, but he laughed it off and said maybe I needed more sleep. He didn't understand. I wasn't just tired. I was being worn down. Something was happening each night while I lay completely unaware. The worst morning was when I woke up to find my blanket completely gone. Not kicked to the floor, not even in the room. I searched everywhere and finally found it in the hallway, neatly folded. That same day, I looked beneath the bed and found something new, something that hadn't been there before. A single fingernail. It was cracked, discolored, and jagged at the edge, and it wasn't mine. I held it in a tissue, staring at it with a kind of numb horror. I didn't know what to do with it. Was someone getting in? Was something living in my house? The thought that it might not be human grew harder to ignore. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat up in bed, watching the clock tick past 2:07. I held my phone flashlight in one hand, my heart pounding, and when the sound began, those slow, familiar Scratch's eye leaned over the edge of the bed, trembling. I aimed the light under the bed but saw nothing. Still, the sound continued right beneath me. I froze, unsure whether to scream or stay silent. Then it stopped, and something sighed, not loudly but close. So close, it tickled my ankle. I never slept in that room again. I was growing desperate. Between the nightly scratches, the bruises, and the sense of something watching me, sleep had become a distant luxury. I felt like I was losing my mind. I needed real proof that I wasn't imagining it. So I bought a motion-activated night vision camera. It had clear audio, a strong infrared sensor, and the ability to record all night. I placed it across from my bed, aimed low, to catch anything that might move under or around it. I told myself it was the final test. If nothing showed up, maybe I really was going crazy. The first night, I stayed up just long enough to make sure. The camera was working before finally letting myself fall asleep. I didn't dream. I never did anymore. Something about the tension in that room kept my mind locked in place. When I woke up, the clock read 5:14 a.m. and the camera's light was still on. I felt sick, like I'd been holding my breath all night. I sat up and grabbed the camera. My fingers trembled as I plugged it into my laptop and started reviewing the footage. The first few hours were uneventful me, tossing and turning, the faint creaks of a house settling. But then, right on time, the timestamp changed to 2:07 a.m. and the motion sensor activated. There was no sound at first, just me lying there, stiff and unmoving. Then the blanket moved, only slightly, a ripple, as if a hand had pressed lightly on top. I watched, my stomach twisting, as the fabric bunched near my feet and then smoothed out again. It wasn't random, it was precise, and then came the hand. A pale, thin hand slid slowly into frame from underneath the bed. It didn't scurry or claw, it moved calmly, like it had done this many times before. The fingers were too long, too delicate. They crept upward and stopped just below my ankle, which was sticking out from under the blanket. The hand rested there for a second, then it touched me. I flinched on camera, just a twitch, like my body knew something was wrong, even in sleep. But I didn't wake up. The hand stayed for a moment longer, gently cupping my ankle before sliding back beneath the bed. The video ended shortly after, with no further movement. I stared at the screen, numb. I couldn't breathe properly. I didn't even realize I was crying until I saw a tear fall onto the keyboard. It wasn't just the horror of what I said, it was the calmness of it. The way it touched me, softly, like it was familiar with me, like it had done it before. I replayed it again and again. Every time, I hoped to see some mistake, a trick of lighting, a piece of fabric, anything other than what it truly was. But it never changed. It was a hand, it was deliberate, and it was real. I zoomed in on the frame where the hand was clearest, paused the footage, and studied every detail. The skin was pale gray, wrinkled. The nails were blackened, cracked at the edges. The fingers bent slightly, not quite like a human's, more like they were broken and had healed wrong. The most terrifying part wasn't the look, though. It was the intent. That hand reached up with purpose, like it knew exactly where I was. Like it had done this so many times before, and I had simply never caught it. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed in the living room with all the lights on, staring at the monitor. For hours, watching myself do nothing as the hand returned. Again, at 2:07 a.m. this time, it didn't touch me. It just hovered near my leg, waiting. Then, slowly, it retreated, almost disappointed. But it knew it was being watched now. The next day, I showed the footage to a friend. They watched it with a forced smile, tried to laugh it off, said it must be some amazing editing, but I could see it in their eyes. The moment the hand appeared, their face changed. Something inside them recognized it, just like I had. But they didn't want to believe it. No one does. I still keep the camera running every night, but I've stopped reviewing the footage. I already know it's there, and every morning, I find the blanket folded neatly at the foot of the bed, like it's saying thank you. When I told my roommate about what had been happening, I could see the doubt immediately on his face. We'd been friends for years, and I knew he wasn't the superstitious type, but I was desperate. I showed him the scratches on the floor, the bruises on my legs, even the paused footage of the pale hand creeping out from under the bed. He stared at it for a long time and then gave me a weak laugh, saying it must be a prank or maybe some next-level insomnia. Still, he agreed to help. In fact, he said, "If something's really under there, I'll deal with it myself." I told him to sleep in my room that night and see for himself. He was half joking when he went in. He brought a baseball bat and said he'd take care of my ghost rat. I didn't laugh. I handed him the night vision camera and said nothing. I moved to the couch for the night, keeping my phone close in case anything happened. But as the evening turned into midnight, and midnight turned into 2 a.m., I couldn't relax. My stomach twisted with dread. I kept checking the time. At 2:07 a.m., I heard it. A scream, short, sharp, and raw. I jumped off the couch, my heart nearly stopping. I ran down the hall and burst into the room. My roommate was curled in the far corner, pressed against the wall, his eyes wide and locked onto the bed like he still saw something there. His hands were shaking. He was pale, sweating, and breathing hard, like he had just run a mile. I kept calling his name, asking what happened, but he didn't speak. He just kept staring. I crossed the room, knelt beside him, and tried to snap him out of it. Eventually, he blinked and looked at me, not through me like before, but at me. He whispered, "Don't go near the bed. Don't go near it ever again." I asked him what he saw, but he just shook his head, violently at first, then slower, almost like he couldn't believe it himself. "It said my name," he murmured. "It was underneath, and it whispered my name over and over." He said he'd heard the scratching first, then the floorboards creaked. Then he felt the temperature drop. But what broke him was when he leaned over the bed, thinking maybe it was just his imagination, and a voice from the darkness whispered his name right into his ears, low and deliberate, like it had been practicing. He never saw a face, just the sound, the breath, and the unmistakable feeling that it had known him long before that night. He refused to sleep in that room again. He slept on the floor of the living room with the lights on, mumbling to himself. He wouldn't look at me, wouldn't even go near the hallway where the room was. That night changed him. He wasn't just afraid, he was broken. Something had gotten inside his head in a way I hadn't seen before. The next day, I checked the camera. The footage confirmed what he said. There was no visible figure, but the audio captured the whispering, soft but unmistakable. The voice didn't just say his name once. It said it 9 times, slowly, with pauses, like it enjoyed saying it, like it was calling out to him personally. After that, he moved out. He didn't give notice, didn't ask for rent back. He just packed his things and left. And before he did, he pulled me aside and said, "It's not just in your room, it follows your bed. It's tied to it." I didn't know what he meant until I tried sleeping on the couch the next night. Just to be safe, I dragged the mattress off my bed frame and laid it on the floor in the living room. I was too tired, too afraid to do anything else. I left a light on, kept my phone beside me, and forced myself to lie still at exactly 2:07 a.m. The scratching started, not from the bedroom this time, from beneath the mattress I had dragged out with me. The same rhythm, the same slow pace, and then the soft whisper, my name. That was when I understood. The thing under the bed wasn't haunting the room, it was haunting me. After what happened to my roommate, I knew leaving the room wouldn't be enough. I needed to get away from the bed itself. I tried sleeping on the couch again, but by now, the entity had already learned how to find me. The scratching came again, softer this time, but still, at 2:07 a.m., it didn't matter where I slept anymore. It was never the room, it was me. I began to realize that moving around the house was pointless. I started sleeping in my car, parked down the street, just to feel some distance between myself and it. But the bruises still came. I'd wake up with new ones, sometimes small handprints, sometimes long scrapes across my back that I couldn't have made on my own. One night, I drove nearly an hour out of town, parked in a public lot near a 24-hour gas station, and forced myself to stay awake. I kept the doors locked and the lights on inside the car, watching the clock inch toward 2:07. My heart pounded with every minute. When it hit, I held my breath, expecting something, anything, but nothing happened. I waited another 10 minutes, then 30, still nothing. I started to relax, maybe even believe I had left it behind. I was still scared, but relief crept in. I fell asleep in the driver's seat just before sunrise. When I woke up, I found a note wedged between my windshield and the wiper. It was written on plain paper, with letters that looked like they had been scraped rather than drawn. Jagged, inconsistent. The message said, "You can't hide from what's inside you." I didn't tell anyone. Who would I even tell? The police? A psychologist? None of them could explain how that message got there. I had locked the doors. I had parked under lights and security cameras. I hadn't heard a sound all night. Yet somehow, it had followed me again. That same night, I returned home and did what I'd been dreading. I tried to destroy the bed. I dragged the mattress and frame outside to the backyard, lit it with lighter fluid, and set it on fire. I watched it burn until nothing remained but twisted metal and scorched wood. I thought maybe that would be the end, that the thing needed the bed to hold on to me, that maybe I could sever the connection by burning it. But I was wrong. The very next night, I laid down on a new mattress in a different room, on the floor with no frame. I didn't even try to sleep. I sat there watching the time, eyes fixed on the clock. At 2:07 a.m., I felt a sudden gust of wind, not from the window or a draft, but from beneath me, like something had exhaled. The floor creaked gently under my weight. Then I heard the voice again. It was right in my ear this time, close enough to feel the warmth of the breath behind the words. It whispered, "Now you're mine." I jumped up and ran out of the room. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, or the one after that. For days, I kept the lights on, drank coffee by the gallon, tried to stay awake through sheer panic, but exhaustion caught up to me eventually. I passed out one afternoon on the couch, just for a few minutes. When I woke up, I found new scratches on my chest. It had been waiting. I called a priest. He came to bless the house, But the moment he stepped into the hallway, he paused and asked if there had been any deaths in the home. I told him no. He looked pale and said the air was wrong. He sprinkled holy water in each room, said prayers under his breath, and then left in a hurry. He never answered my follow-up calls. A week later, I found his card shoved under my door. The back had a single word written on it: run. I don't know what it wants or why it chose me. I don't know what now your mine really means. I only know that every night, at the exact same time, I feel its presence. Whether I'm in bed, on the floor, or even sitting upright in a chair, it finds me. The scratching starts, then the breath, then the voice. And now, sometimes, I feel it watching me during the day too, just beyond the corners of rooms, reflected faintly in dark windows. It's not just at night anymore. It's always here, and it never sleeps.